There's a really powerful time management system that an author that I enjoy named Laura Vanderkam covers in her book called 168 Hours, which is how many hours are in 1 week. The premise of the time management system is that you don't just fill your week calendar full of everything you have to do. Instead of doing that, you wipe the whole thing clean with absolutely nothing in it, and then you make a list of what's most important to you and you fill your calendar with those most important things. And if there's room for the other stuff, then it falls in. If not, you then fill your calendar with what is most important to you and do only those things. And this got me thinking about something that Tony Robbins said about guarding the gate to your mind. And he was talking about how to live a very fulfilling and effective life. You can't just let anything into your mind. And he tells a story where his mentor sits him down and his mentor says, all right, what if you have a cup of coffee here on the table? And he's like, now what if your worst enemy comes and puts a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee? He's like, what do you have then? And Tony is like, well, I'd have some sweet coffee. And so he's like, well, yeah. And then his mentor says, now what happens if your best friend accidentally drops the strongest poison into your coffee and poisons it? And Tony's like, well, that'd be detrimental, right? Like it would kill him. And so his mentor says, exactly. He's like, your mind is like that coffee. You have to guard it very strictly. You can't just let anything flow into there. And when I was thinking about these two halves from Laura and from Tony, like it just suddenly clicked with me. What really, really high achievers and very successful people are grasping, maybe even unconsciously. It seems like a lot of other people are just completely missing it. And, because we all know that to be, productive, successful, happy, live a meaningful life, or to just achieve your goals, for example, you have to know exactly where you're going, right? You have to have a very clear vision of where you are going and why you want to go there. And it's like, yes, we hear that quite a lot. You can't hit a target you can't see, right? It's not only where we're going that's important. The other essential part of the equation is, what do you allow into your mind? What do you let influence you? Who do you let influence you? It's kind of like the surgeon's fingers mindset, where the fingers of a surgeon are their livelihood. That is essential to their occupation. And so they guard their fingers like crazy. They don't use knives, they don't use chainsaws, they don't use anything that could damage their fingers. That is how we have to treat our minds. We have to treat our minds like that. Like our minds are us, to put it bluntly. Like that is who we are. If we just let anything flow into there, that can dramatically damage our livelihood, our fulfillment in life, and where we're going and why we're doing it and who we surround ourselves with. Like, do we look at our minds like that? Do we guard them? Do we protect it? If you have a clear vision of where you're going, you see where you're going, you see where you want to end up, but then you work backwards from there and you have to figure out, okay, what do you have to cut in order to get to that place? What are the things that are gonna prevent you from getting there? What are the things that are gonna block you? And I think a lot of times when we aren't achieving what we want, it's not because we don't know what to do, it's because we don't know what not to do. There's this great quote in a book by Austin Kleon called Steal Like an Artist. And he says, give someone endless possibilities of things that they could do, and you have a recipe for no progress at all. Like endless possibilities are incredibly suffocating. They're not liberating. And sometimes creating restrictions and boundaries for us to reside within can actually allow us to flourish. And when I was thinking about this, it reminded me of an author, and unfortunately I can't remember his name, but Reagan and I were talking about him in our podcast, where it's like, he's very unique because he writes a ton of books, but he is like off the grid. Like you can't contact him, you can't find him hardly. Like he is just gone. Like, and he's just out there writing because that's what he loves to do. And people are trying to like get him to speak and like all this stuff. And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. He's like, I just want to write books. And he's incredibly efficient at them. And one time this guy was asking like, how are you so good at this? Like, how do you churn out these huge novels? Like, and he's like, well, simple. He's like, I don't have email. And it's like, oh, okay. That's a really good point, because he's like, he has a clear vision. He's like, okay, here's what I want to do. And I know what is going to restrict me and distract me. He's like, I'm going to cut that completely out of my life. Now that's pretty drastic, right? That's an extreme version of this, but it makes a point, right? Because he's doing what he thoroughly loves, and what is most important to him And for him, email gets in between that. People were asking him, like, how do you do this? You see the difference there? Like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? What skills are you applying here? And he's like, it's not what I'm doing, it's what I'm not doing. You see the difference? It's like, he's cutting off the things that are preventing him to flourish. And the people that grasp both sides of this, where they know exactly where they're going and they know the things that they have to cut in order to get there, those are the ones that are incredibly efficient at accomplishing their goals. And what's fascinating about these individuals is that they are masters at filtering, because they'll take a huge lump of information and they'll pick out, okay, this, and this are gonna help me get to my goal, and the rest of this just out the window. Whereas the rest of us, unfortunately, we just get blasted by this huge wave of information. After we get completely sidelined, that's when we stand up and we try to figure out what's actually gonna help us. But the key difference there is that they had the filters in place before the information hit them. Before they had this huge lump come at them of life and all of the distractions and everything that's grabbing for their attention, they had the filters in place beforehand. And that's so critical. It's about deciding whether or not you're willing to endure the short-term pain or discomfort to become the person that is capable of achieving or accomplishing your goal. You're not just accomplishing something. You're not just accomplishing a goal. You're not just finishing the race or whatever analogy you want to throw in there. You're not just doing that. You are becoming the person that is capable of doing that. You see the difference? Because like over here, it's like, okay, I'm gonna get this, achieve this. Like, yay, awesome, I'm gonna do this. But what we miss is that all of this is us becoming the person that's capable of doing this. That is huge. And when we grasp that, it is so powerful. It is so empowering to our lives. Again, it not only are you getting the outcome, but it's what kind of person are you becoming. That, like, how is this changing you? Like, how is this actually changing you as a person? And a critical way of discovering this, of how to become that person, is by asking new and better questions. And so for me, I attack myself with questions when I'm trying to figure out a goal or do something in life that's like, big. It's not just this little thing. Like, it's a big goal that you want to accomplish per se, or you just want to live effectively or productively or whatever you fill that blank with. Like, ask really good questions. Like, how does someone who's capable of accomplishing this live? How does someone like that live? How do they spend their time? How don't they spend their time? And a part of becoming that person that is capable of accomplishing that goal is learning what that person has to lay aside. What sacrifices do they have to make? When I think about this, like when I think of sacrifices that people make, I like in my mind, I see sports players or athletes, because they make incredible sacrifices. And all the time you hear people only looking at the outcome and be like, wow, like I wish I could do that. But none of them ever see the sacrifices and what they have to put in and the person they have to become to get that outcome. And many times I think that is where a lack of discipline and a lack of motivation come from, where we are only looking at the outcome and we only see that glory moment and we say, I wish I could do that, or I wish that I could accomplish that, or I wish I could be that, or do that thing or that skill. We're completely missing the whole process of becoming the person capable of doing that. That's what actually gives you the motivation to accomplish it. And a really good story that fits along with this, kind of from my own life, where this like cemented in my mind. I was particularly lethargic one day, and I covered this in another video, but I was particularly just like unmotivated, undisciplined, just like I'd been kind of in a rut for a while. I was like, what's like the most disciplined thing I could do right now? And I was like, I could take a cold shower. And I'd never done it before. It was very difficult. But there again, it was like, it wasn't so much the outcome. It wasn't like, oh, health benefits, all this stuff, like, like have to worry about getting sick or, all this stuff that supposedly goes with cold showers. It wasn't at all about that. And it still isn't about that. 5 months later, I'm still doing it. It's about what kind of person would have the capability of doing that. I want to become that person. When I tell people like, oh yeah, I take cold showers, they're always like, why would you do that? Like, and if I try to explain to them, oh, well, it's good for this, it does this, gives you more energy, you can be, all the, they're like, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to drink a Red Bull and I'll get the same thing, because they're only seeing the outcome. That's all they see. Versus if I'm like, here's what I have to become as a person to be able to do this. That's when it starts to click with people. And a very critical piece of this is understanding how the pathway between your mind and your body work, because it's a two-way pathway. When you do an action, it's not only starting in the mind first, like habits and changing behavior and things like that. Like the actions you do have a powerful impact on your mind and your habits and your how you process information and how you live. And the vice versa is true as well. But too many times we first try to change it in our minds and then do the action. When in reality, our physiology and how we use our body and the actions we do has a huge impact on our minds, how we operate, but also how we change things about ourselves, how we change habits and belief systems. And I think sometimes we forget that. Like physiology is a powerful tool that a lot of times we don't tap into. And this is why it's so important to imitate your heroes or the people that you're trying to become. Yeah, like I said, it goes both ways. Like you're not trying to be them. You're trying to see the world through their eyes and get a glimpse of how they think. Oftentimes their thinking governs their actions. And so if you can in a sense copy or imitate their actions and what they do on a daily basis, you'll get a pretty decent picture of what's happening inside of their mind. The whole like fake it till you make it thing, I'm not quite sure where I stand on that yet, but like that's kind of the thought process behind it, trying to see the world through their eyes. So for me, when I was developing my goals for this year, I was like, okay, at some point I want to turn this YouTube channel into something that can support me financially. It's like, okay, cool. How does a person that does something like that, how do they behave? How do they live? What do they do and what don't they do? So I'll leave you with a couple questions of like, who are you becoming? Like the goal is powerful, yes, but like who is the person you are becoming to be able to achieve that goal? What sacrifices are you willing to make in order to achieve this? Are you willing to make those sacrifices, or are you only looking at the outcome and wanting the final product? Another way of looking at this is, why are you becoming this person? And what is this person capable of accomplishing?